Building a new healthcare system is the mission behind the Wellness Company. Let's go ahead and welcome back to the show Peter Galili, who wants to help create it and is going to give us some more. Peter, it's good to see you again.
Thanks for having me, Natalie.
You know, last time, one of our points that we were talking about in our conversation was about the instability in the world. I mean, that's something that everybody is aware of, especially when it talks to that spike in interest, which is a result of many of the conflicts that we're seeing, whether right here at home or across the world. How does this current global instability affect us when it comes to medical, when it comes to other things that we are used to living with here in the United States?
Yeah, it's a great question, Natalie. Last time we spoke about the fact that over 90% of Americans' pharmaceuticals are produced overseas. It's great if we're trying to cut costs, but when it comes to people's health, I don't think a lot of Americans are willing to sacrifice in that front. Unfortunately, when we have global instability like we're seeing right now in the Middle East, countries do the natural thing and they start to stockpile. They want to keep their own citizens safe and healthy. And that doesn't bode well for many Americans who are relying on these imported drugs for their daily health. So what happens? Well, demand spikes, prices rise. We see shortages at the pharmacy, and something like 95% of pharmacy technicians are reporting a shortage of at least one critical life-saving drug in pharmacies across America today.
You know, it's interesting you talk about countries stockpiling. I'll be honest with you. I'm one that I didn't really think of this when it comes to pharmaceuticals. So I'm glad you're drawing attention to this. But if companies are stockpiling, what can we do as individuals in the United States to perhaps have that same preparation, if you will?
Yeah, we always say at the Wellness Company, be prepared. There's really no excuse, especially after what we saw during the COVID-19 crisis. Be prepared. And there's really four things you can do to be prepared. That's stockpiling on food, ammo, gold, and meds. And meds are really where the Wellness Company comes into play. So we offer a medical emergency kit. It contains 8 life-saving prescription medications that every adult should have in their medicine cabinet. It's like having a pharmacy in your house. These meds will come at handy for any use, whether you're traveling, whether you're at home for the holidays, whether you're maybe camping or at the vacation home over the summer. Everybody should have life-saving medications in their medicine cabinet to stay healthy and well.
Well, you know, of course, some of those ones that we've listed and have been able to talk about in the past, from what I know, they require a doctor's office visit a lot of times and do require the prescription. How are you able to take these prescription drugs that people depend on and put them inside your medical kit for people to be able to order?
It's a great question. We believe that access to these medications are a God-given right to Americans. We offer these prescriptions through our 50-state telemedicine practice. Any American can go on and order them online and then fill out a short 5-minute questionnaire after checkout to confirm their suitability for these meds and their off-label uses. And we cover about 32 different scenarios, everything from anthrax, COVID, pneumonia, bites, syphilis, you name it, we have it all covered in our guidebook that's also included within the medical emergency kit that gives you clear instructions for safe use so that when the time comes and you need the medications, you know exactly what to do.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Let me know if you can see and hear okay. My name is Liam Sturgess. I'm a musician, singer-songwriter, investigative reporter for the Kennedy Beacon, and an overall interested person in learning as many new things as I can. Speaking of learning new things, this is my very first time ever using the brand new Rumble Studio. So please do bear with me if there are any technical challenges to work through, but so far so good as far as I can tell. So this was a video we just watched about a company called The Wellness Company. And I'm going to drop the link to that video in the chat. I'm going to, in fact, as we go through our discussion today and we talk about The Wellness Company and all the related issues that come up, I'm going to be sharing every single reference link that we use and so on and so forth. And if I happen to miss one, we'll make sure it gets put out after the fact. But today is a discussion about this very interesting company, but like I said, also about a number of very interesting things that have come up in relation to it and the larger community in which it operates, and very interesting drama that continues to unfold. There's a bit of backstory that we're going to walk you through. And luckily for me, I don't have to do it alone. I'm joined by a good friend of mine who hopefully will be able to turn on her camera and join in. Kristin Elizabeth. Are you there, Kristin? There you are.
Hi, Liam.
How are you?
I'm good. Always nice to see you.
You as well. And I'm really happy we're doing this because, well, first, who are you? You are an excellent researcher. You're somebody who I've gotten to become very close friends with. And I well, don't mean to start with a lot of compliments, but you're a very you're a very positive role model for me. And I appreciate every time we get to talk about, things like the topic we're going to talk about today, and just other life things. You've become a very good friend. So in terms of introducing you to the audience, that's what I want people to know about you.
Very nice of you to say.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want people to know about you?
No, for the purposes of this conversation, that's a very thorough and warm introduction. Thank you, Liam. It's reciprocal.
Well, that's kind of you to say. So why are we here today? How do we want to start this discussion? Yeah, actually, let me offer this as the framing question here. What is our intention today, Kristin?
Well, our intention is to respond to some requests that were made of me, and I can expand on that in a minute, and then further expand on a couple points that have already been covered in our work and some that haven't yet been covered in our work that just kind of bring forward the research that we've been doing and some additional concerns. The background, for anyone who doesn't already have it's probably going to be a little bit of a disjointed conversation if you don't have this background context, is that I published an article on my Substack, which is Beyond the Maze, in February of last year, exploring different questions and concerns around the wellness company. And that was picked up by an additional group of people who kind of continued researching down additional related threads. A couple that come to mind are an individual who also writes a Substack called Me Stuff. And that person, did further research into some of the companies connected to wellness company owners, and also an individual on Twitter who also has a Substack under his name, Jeff Payne, who has done a series of Substack articles looking more at the products that a different company also connected to owners of the wellness company are developing or having clinical trials at the moment. And there were some other Substackers that wrote things. The other notable individual who picked up this story and expanded on it is Polly, who goes by Amazing Polly and has been making videos for a long time. So quite a bit of attention's been brought onto this company. And as a result of that, at a certain point, I don't know that I actually have the date. I want to say, no, I published my article in November of last year, not February. That was a mistake. Right. I'm pretty sure that this interview that the wellness company co-owner Foster Coulson did with a gentleman by the name of Jim Torma was in February. And this past February, a month ago,
February 4th.
The context for this conversation that these two had was on Twitter. Jim Torma was inviting Polly to come on to his platform, which is called Fear Academy, I think. And she doesn't do interviews with people, so she declined. And he said he was going to have Foster Coulson on and that we could submit questions. And that was really directed to Polly, myself, you, Liam, and anyone else who wanted to. He said, you can submit questions. So I responded and I said that we would after talking to you about it. And the timeline for that interview that these two gentlemen had was like less than 24 hours. It was 1 p.m. the following day on a Sunday. And Jim Torma asked me on Twitter if I'd be able to submit the questions by then. And so I did. I published them on my Twitter. I think it was like 12:35 or 12:40. So it was cutting it close, but I met his deadline. And there was a lot of back and forth or commentary made during this conversation that my tardiness to submit these questions sort of maybe created a situation where it was excusable to not ask them. And so there's really no point in like dissecting this conversation between Foster Colson and Jim Torma. If people want to, they can go watch the whole thing. Polly's questions were asked. A number of people in the chat had questions that were asked. There was some unhelpful commentary and behavior in the chat. And it was really frustrating for me because I think it could have actually been a really productive session if it was approached with professionalism and just simply gone through the questions and answered them. The questions that were asked that came from you and I, which were the first two out of, I don't know, I'm guessing 12. I actually really appreciated hearing Foster Colson's answers to those. And I just wished that they just would have continued focusing on providing information. But it was tone deaf for sure, the whole thing. And that it circulated in such a way that a lot of people who didn't really understand what was going on with the wellness company and watched this felt concerned afterwards. So I don't think it helped anything there for them. And at one point in that conversation, Foster Colson brings up a number of things that he is demanding I retract from my piece, and he writes.
Kristin, before we get into that, I just want, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to,
okay.
I just want, that's a good summary of what's happened so far. And I think people should understand, like, this has become it has exploded. It went from sort of a research project that we had just a personal curiosity in, as we learned more and more, we heard the name The Wellness Company more and more, and it's now exploded into, like, there's no single line of thought or inquiry, or like there's no, when you think of The Wellness Company story, it is no one thing. And there's two specific things I want to establish right at the top. The first is everything that we say in here in this video, and this applies in general, everything we say is our statements only. Like, these are things that we stand behind for ourselves, but nothing we say should be attributed to anybody else. Other people have their own lines of curiosity and inquiry and questions and criticisms. And of course, as is often pointed out, we all exist in large networks of people, and simply connecting dot to dot, it's true, doesn't necessarily mean anything. We have to, on all sides of a discussion like this, actually listen to what an individual is saying and work with that, and that's certainly what we've tried to do. And I think we've done a good job at it personally. But yeah, that's just to say, this video, this is entirely Kristin and I's perspective being explored with you guys here today. The second thing is, speaking of Kristin and I, and someone asked this in the chat. So the nature of the article that we put together, it was a collaborative piece that you and I did. And we had slightly different contributions to the article. We describe it usually as like you were the author of it. It's your voice. We explored a couple of ideas you were particularly passionate about, and I provided research and archival support, and I contributed in areas where I had particular interest myself. And between the two of us, we got this article put together. So that was a collaborative effort. Is there anything else we wanted to establish before we jump in? No? Good to go?
Yeah.
So let's do it. So you were talking about Foster had some things that he was asking of you. Am I right?
Yeah. So what's interesting is that, there were people in the chat during this interview Foster Colson did with Jim Tormott saying things that I didn't find helpful. And one of the comments at the time that I didn't think was helpful was someone said like, oh, the whole thing's staged. And so they get a kick out of this because, obviously they decided to do this really last minute and it didn't appear staged to me. But at this particular point in this conversation, Foster Colson prepared is the word that was used. This whole thing was prepared. Foster Colson whips out his notes. And so he clearly at least prepared this portion. And it's a list of things that he reads that we'll play and I can respond to and you can respond to, because he's demanding retractions, and he rightfully states that you and I both said if there was something inaccurate in the article, we would look at it, we would review it, and we would edit it or retract it if it was, false. And so that's been part of the process we've now gone through together, you and I, is actually reviewing these different things.
So do we want to play now? I believe I'm at the right spot. Do we want to hear some of the examples he brought up?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
Or anything like that. Here's what I can tell you. This goes back to Kristin Elizabeth's Beyond the Maze. And by the way, thank you, Kristin, for reaching out to me in advance and interviewing me for that article. I really appreciate it. Even though, a lot of people have used it as proof, even though it's full of lies. And, actually, I have some notes, and I'm going to read from some of the notes and some of the points that I make.
Why don't you do that? Yeah.
Because I think it's clear, and it's good to kind of clear the air on this. On the 13 Substacks she's written, the only 2 in the last 6 months are about me. So, I've had some time to kind of think about this. So, Kristin, this is directly for you. You talked about Ilavash. Let's just talk about that for a minute. Are people not allowed to develop underdeveloped countries anymore? Are they not allowed to support countries that don't have the same economic status as the United States or Canada? I don't think that's a bad thing. She says that Ilavash has no food. Really? Have you been there? Have you been to Ilavash before? Over half the island is some of the most fertile farmland probably in the world on Ilavash. And yes, there's 5,000 acres of active farmland today, and they are producing plenty of food for the island. So that's wrong. The island does produce food. No water. Well, have you asked? Did you reach out to Watersmark, Kristin? Did you reach out to Watersmark, ask them about how they're developing freshwater wells for locals, schools, and healthcare? Did you ask Watersmark any of these questions? Or did you just write lies with no real facts behind it?
Okay, Liam, can you stop it there?
You bet.
Okay, so just addressing these concerns he has first. The actual quote from the article that talks about food and water on the island of Ilavash is the following. Though most of the former slaves were repatriated over time, some remained on the island, because this is the island off of the coast of Haiti where former slaves from the US were brought, and they tried to develop a plantation there, and it didn't really work. So if you want more context about this particular thread, you're just going to have to go read the piece. So it says, though most of the former slaves were repatriated over time, some remained on the island. The current residents of Île Vache are descendants of these former American slaves, as well as Haitians who have integrated with that population over time. Though stunningly beautiful, the island is terribly difficult to cultivate for food and has very little fresh water. It is a paradise that requires its residents live in a constant struggle for sustenance. And that was based on probably a dozen articles I read having to do with different points in history of the island. I also spoke to a Haitian citizen who recently moved back to the mainland, but before that had lived on Île Vache for over 2 decades. And furthermore, explored the situation that took place on Île Vache in 2013, 14, 15 through journalists. There's multiple links in my article to these stories, these articles from journalists who were covering the turmoil on the island at the time. And that also includes this documentary called Exploitation of Eden, which is unfortunately still doing the indie film festival circuit and is not available to the public yet, as far as I know. But I think we should watch the trailer.
All right, let's do it.
La Vache est un endroit exceptionnel, c'est la dernière rive vierge des Caraïbes.
Put the closed captions on in English.
Oh, good idea. Okay. See, I forget not everyone speaks French.
La Vache est un endroit exceptionnel, c'est la dernière rive vierge des Caraïbes.
Le ministère du Tourisme a développé tout un ensemble de stratégies visant à attirer beaucoup plus de touristes en Haïti.
On a cru à cette forme de tourisme qui pouvait se développer de la même façon que la République dominicaine, et ça n'a pas été le cas, à cause de toutes les histoires politiques qu'il y a pu y avoir.
Avec nous arrêté 10 mai 2013 qui sorti, qui déclarait nous de tout bien nous dans l'Île Vache, de tout intérêt, que nous pas faire 3 cités pour mettre mon Île Vache, pour que nous même pas habitués. Dit non, mon Île Vache, pas qu'à vivre dans cité.
Dès qu'à 8 minutes, je me travail, quand je vais prendre net, je vais quitter le côté là de mon travail.
Les policiers bim étaient rentrés sous Zilea, ils étaient maltraités en pile.
Les machines police débarquent sur moi. Ils arrêté madame, mon petit moi. Ils ont minoté. C'est pas pour nous.
Nous, il n'y a pas de manifester pour demander au gouvernement manger. Il n'y a pas de manifester pour demander pour du gouvernement, il y a grand goût. Il n'y a pas de manifester pour demander à bas aucun gouvernement. Nous sommes prêts pour nous collaborer, mais nous pas accepter pour nous déplacer, ni pour nous perdre bien nous pour nous territoire.
M'a demandé nous dans nos peuple là pour nous continuer bataille pour jusqu'à ce que nous joignons victoire finale là.
Tu vois si la belle comme ça, c'est paysan Île Vache qui bâtit, qui habille, qui fait belle comme ça. Mais si bon projet comme il fait, faut projet ça la fête pour et avec nous avec paysans Île Vache.
Est-ce que nous même Île Vache et pas nous, est-ce que nous pas besoin de vivre parce que si nous regardons la pays, la situation nous vivre comme si et pas même pas dire même un chien pas vivre comme ça rien à vivre grand goût misère.
ilavashfilm.com. There you
Right.
go.
So, yeah, just to close that particular topic, yes, Foster Colson people are allowed to develop underdeveloped countries or islands, areas of countries, but people are also allowed to call that exploitation and have that opinion. And I'm not telling other people what to think or how to feel. You're free to have your opinion about that, but I shared mine. And the people that made this film feel similarly, and I think a lot of other people do too. On the note of no food and no water, I can't retract something that I didn't say. And I didn't say that there was no food on Ilavash, but I don't think bulldozing people's farms also helps the agricultural situation there. And I didn't say there was no water. I said there's very little water, and it sounds like you're, in agreement with that, and you recognize that that's the case. I can't imagine anyone developing any kind of tourist, destination on that island without figuring out how to treat the water there, given what I've read, for the sake of the locals or for tourists. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's sort of an enigma, like this whole Haitian island development thing. And that was one of the things I want to say that Foster was very forthcoming about when we asked if he has anything to do with Watermark. He said yes, and he explained his role. And that was that, like, we, between you and I, shared that felt like a moment of appreciated sincerity, and it answered the question. But this is to say, like, as someone, on the outside in Canada looking in, to this Haiti thing, like, it is a very enigmatic situation that, like, what we have available to us are, like, firsthand reports, like the one we just saw, this documentary being put together using people from the island and their perspectives. I mean, it's the kind of place you'd like to physically go and experience for oneself. That's unfortunately not something I can do myself in the next week or two or month. But it is true. There's always limitations on, like, can we take that documentary as credible? Well, not on like, you can't take just that and say, well, that represents the entire reality. With any topic, all you can do is take the available evidence and, create your best understanding based on that. And there's certainly degrees of credibility when evaluating information. But it sounds to me as though Foster was responding to something that you didn't quite say, which is unfortunate, because there are genuine discussions and disagreements that can be had, and that's kind of what we want to do, is be able to have these kind of discussions with Foster and with anybody on any topic, frankly. Anyway, I'm sort of rambling now, but so that's the Ilavash situation. Very interesting.
Well, can I just clarify, because I think it's important. So that documentary covered a time period. I seriously doubt Foster Colson was a consultant for Watersmark yet on, or any involvement yet in earnest of Watersmark, the company. I don't know what the timeline is. We now know that David Lopez, Foster Colson's business partner in multiple ventures, was connected to the first lady, at least, of Haiti at that time. And the president was Martelly, the prime minister Lamoth, and it was their regime that decreed that this island was public utility. The government was going to come in and develop the island. And the documentary focuses on that complicated situation then that arose with the people kind of rising up against that to keep their land. They were going to be displaced and put in housing that was going to be built for them. And then the Haitian government, like, sending in government forces and contractors coming with bulldozers and stuff like that. So to be clear, that documentary covers a time period I didn't ever say Foster Colson or David Lopez or Watersmark had anything to do with. It just set the stage for clearly there's an interest in developing this island, right? And so that's become a situation where Watersmark now has the contract to do that. Haiti is in complete and utter turmoil at the moment. And Foster Colson also, says in this interview that it's not really happening right now, development of this island. But in the future, if it does, he's happy to help with it. And that was also corroborated by the individual from Haiti who I spoke to, that, the development maybe started, but it didn't continue. So.
Okay. That is helpful clarification. Okay. So,
shall we move on?
Let's move on. What do you want to talk about next?
Well, we should just go back to the video because he lists this whole list of stuff he
we can continue where we were.
Addressed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, bear with us, folks. New studio here. Okay, resuming.
So, Kristin, you can have another follow-up Substack, okay, on these questions. Are you making notes right now so you can retract? Because you have said, if you're wrong, you'll retract the things that you said. So I'm telling you, factually, you're wrong on these things. So the expectation is, if you have any honor at all, or any journalistic integrity at all, that you will retract these things and make it right. You say Lopez.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
yeah, so
I'll pause.
real quick, this is about Ilvash. So Amazing Polly is saying that you're going to pave over the island.
Oh, wow. You mean we're going to pave over 10,000? We're going to lay concrete or all over 10,000 acres, and it's just going to be a giant tarmac for airplanes? Is that the goal? Care to respond?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. They're not responding. Yeah, keep going. Keep going. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. You say Lopez is in almost every venture I have. Well, you're grasping at straws. You really have no idea. He did not co-found the wellness company with me, just so we're crystal clear for you, nor did you ever ask that.
Okay, I think that's a point we want to address. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, did David Lopez co-found the wellness company? That's a good question.
Yeah.
So how do you want to tackle this one?
Well, of course, he co-owns the wellness company. And off the top of my head, outside of companies that Foster Colson co-owns that we don't know about, or Colson Group of aviation companies, all the ones that are listed in the article, they're working in some capacity together. So it doesn't seem like I'm grasping at straws to say almost all of the companies.
Yeah, I don't think like Liberty Blockchain, I for example,
Right. Uh-oh, Liam, where'd you go? You froze. Okay, well, I'll just carry on while we wait for Liam to come back. Are you there?
I hope so. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
We look like we've switched sides here. That's very weird. Okay, let me try this again then. Present. I'm going to bring up the part of the article in question, and this is important to clarify.
Yes.
Okay. So I think we figured out what happened here. So this is the paragraph in question. In January 2022, Lopez and Colson jointly founded a company called International Health Brands. Colson had previously co-founded an investment firm called Integro Capital in October 2021, joining as a co-owner at the same time or shortly thereafter. In June 2022, the two founded the wellness company. So when we revisited this and attempted to determine if indeed we had made a mistake, what we basically discovered is like this paragraph was written the way it was because you've got the wellness company that was created as a portfolio company within this thing called International Health Brands. Foster Coulson and David Lopez co-founded International Health Brands. But even before International Health Brands was a thing, you had Z Labs, the Zelenko protocol. And this is a screenshot, by the way, from an archived version of International Health Brands website, which lists a number of the companies that are part of this package of companies. So the point being, Zelenko Labs in 2021, I don't think it's disputed, was co-founded by Foster Coulson and David Lopez. I think that's known. I think that's celebrated. That's great. Subsequent to that, they co-found International Health Brands, under which, Zelenko Labs and a number of other groups exist. Later on, the wellness company is founded. Now, to be clear, as far as we can tell in our revisiting, it is correct for Foster Coulson to say they did not co-found the wellness company together. This specific company, the wellness company, as part of this larger portfolio of companies, was not specifically co-founded with David Lopez. So where the confusing part comes in, though, is you've got the wellness company, which Foster Coulson is saying, no, that was just me, or at a minimum, that was not David Lopez. It still exists as either a subsidiary or as a package, one of a group of companies that exist under a company that was co-founded by Lopez and Foster Coulson, and is the legacy of Zelenko Labs, which was co-founded by. So I will happily have us take responsibility for that sentence where it says the wellness company was co-founded by David Lopez and Foster Coulson. I think Foster Coulson is correct to clarify that that's not technically true.
But just change it to co-own.
So we will be changing that to either co-own or it'll probably be that simple, or to otherwise clarify, why that was what we said.
Do we want to just reference the part in the introduction to the wave is brave? What is it called? The next wave is brave.
Oh, that's the other thing. Good point.
It's probably not totally relevant, but he credits David Lopez with introducing him to health and wellness.
Yes.
In such a way that, you can see this red thread through these different investments and the launching of these different companies. They're clearly working together.
It's not in question. And so this is, I hope Foster Coulson will understand why it's confusing. The way they set this up, like it's the phrase I hear said is distinction without a difference. Again, he's technically correct, it seems, but it's set up in a way where it's very reasonable for somebody to come to the conclusion that this company, which is part of a company that was co-founded by these two guys. So let me see if I can just find this passage. This is an interesting book if people want to know more. It's called The Next Wave is Brave, Standing Up for Medical Freedom. And it was written, it lists, it's got chapters by a bunch of the founding doctors involved with the wellness company. And it is interesting. It tells their stories, and they're very, very important stories to know. But the introduction was written by Foster Coulson, and he kind of introduces each chapter as it comes along. But the specific line in question, let's see if we can find it here. It's going to take me a minute if you have any stand-up comedy.
Well, we're already 40 minutes in, Liam.
Okay, I found it. Okay. My segue into, here we go. Into that world. Okay, Dave and I, so he's talking about David Lopez. So I'll just go right to this. Dave and I struck up a friendship immediately, and he became the catalyst for me jumping feet first into the health and wellness space. Is that the quote you were thinking of?
I think so. Well, no, there's more, but it doesn't matter.
Okay, but still, I'll find a link to that so people can dig deeper on that if they want.
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay, should we talk about Q Biologics?
Yeah, we should continue playing the video until Foster Coulson's done exhausting his list of retraction demands.
Okay. All right.
You talk about integral capital that it has investments in nanobiosym and Q Biologics. Well, me and Dave and Dr. Vladimir Zelenko are equal partners in Integral Capital, FYI. And Integral Capital consists of the companies that Vladimir Zelenko brought, that he vetted and he met and he thought could change the world. I'll stand beside Zev every single day. So if you don't want to and you think that now Vladimir Zelenko has evil intentions on the world, okay, you can think that. You make lies about Q Biologics. And this is how I know you literally have no idea what you're talking about. This is how I know you literally don't even care about the truth, because you say, and I'm going to quote, furthering the forward march of the same gene-based medicine technology that underlies mRNA COVID-19 rolled out by Pfizer and Moderna. And you're talking about Q Biologics, saying Q Biologics is using the same technology. You're just totally wrong. Like, tell me where you found that. Can you post that for me, please? Kristin Elizabeth, can you please post for me where you found that Q Biologics is using the same underlying technology as mRNA?
Okay, Liam, maybe we should stop it there.
Cool.
Yeah. And I think this is really, I think this is really the only clearly articulated other retraction request that comes from him. He complains a lot more about other things. But so if we address this one, we can move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting one, and I'm going to explain how we came to the perspective on Q Biologics we came to. Let me just get my screen up here. And there's kind of two ways to look at this. Where did I hide this? There we go. So what happened here? The process of looking into Q Biologics. So just a bit of background. Q Biologics, it's one of these biotechnology companies that came out of a long line of biotech companies at the University of British Columbia. And in fact, I have it pulled up. This is a piece I did February of last year, where I sought to answer the question of like where specifically the lipid nanoparticles that were later used in the COVID-19 vaccines, where did these come from? What are all these rumors we're hearing about, the patents? And, there were folks like Dr. David Martin and at one point Dr. Robert Malone had said something along the lines of like Justin Trudeau owned some share, I think like 40% of one of these companies. The long story short is this was an investigation I did into really trying to answer, okay, what are they talking about? What is this? What are these lipid nanoparticles? What are the patents? Yada, 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 yada. So this group of companies, you got Acuitas, you've got Arbutus Biopharma, and then a whole bunch of companies that like were predecessors to these biotech companies. And they all came out of the University of British Columbia, which is that's where I did the first year of my university, and it's a biotech hub. Q Biologics is a more recent company that's come out of that same kind of biotech venture capital, federally funded academic research and development companies seeking to bring novel therapeutics to deal with, as of yet addressed diseases. So that's some context. And so that's the route, of familiarity that brought me into this. Now, to be clear, Q Biologics does something different than, they're not developing lipid nanoparticles. And no, as Foster Coulson says, they do not, as far as we understand, develop and use mRNA as a drug, like in the way that the COVID-19 vaccines were used. But that's not what we were saying. The point we were trying to make is you've got this company who, when you look at two things, we'll do the kind of personnel, and then we'll do the science, basically. So what raised my flags were a number of people on the management team, scientific advisors, the board of directors. And so I just want to highlight a few just to give you insight into why this became a concern, that this was advancing this, the same underlying genetic technology that was later applied to the COVID-19 vaccines. So let me show you, for example, this gentleman who I don't believe he's currently the chief business officer, but Andrew Ray, his bio here, his deal sheet includes partnerships with AstraZeneca, which, as we all know, developed a COVID-19 vaccine. Then Ionis Pharmaceuticals. So I just thought I would double check, see what this particular company does. And indeed, you go to their website and discovery, development, delivery of life-transforming genetic medicines. Okay, but that's a different company. So I'm not saying they should take responsibility for the work done there. Hold on, I lost my screen. And I won't go through every single one. But another good example, and it helps to have some context as to like British Columbia and the kind of development that's done here. You've got this Simon Sutcliffe individual. Now he, as you can see down here, served on the board of Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research and Genome BC. Genome BC advances the genetic medicine sector. Basically, I'll just switch over to this tab on the Campfire Wiki, which I had put together. This is Genome British Columbia, and their whole thing is funding and launching biopharmaceutical companies that specifically do work in the field of genetic medicine, which, by the way, is a broad category. And the kind of companies that then went on to make, things like monoclonal antibodies, things that are in this realm of therapeutics, which are not a one-for-one. These are not mRNA vaccines. That's not what we intend to put across here. Precision Nanosystems is, for example, it's one of several companies founded by the same gentleman, Peter Cullis, who founded Acuitas, who did develop the lipid nanoparticles. So this is the community of research that we're talking about and that Q Biologics works in. And I have a bunch of links and examples I pulled up that I'm happy to share after. For the sake of time, we don't have to go through them all right now, but I have prepared them all and I will share them with everybody. But then it comes to, okay, well, are we factually correct when we say that, scientifically speaking? And the reality is, as it turns out, you and I aren't necessarily scientists ourselves, but there have been other folks who have looked at this from the scientific perspective, and I'll mention one in a minute. But I wanted to share a couple of scientific publications, which, again, may help provide some context as to why we said what we said. So this was a study, in fact, which you shared with me, site-specific immunomodulator and novel treatment for Crohn's disease. And again, this is something I want people to not just take our word, but understand that in this paper, for example, which discusses clinical work done by Q Biologics, they talk about mRNA expression in cells. And that's not the only time. It's not just word association. You've got this press release from March 2017. Q Biologics discovers correlation between patient genetics and response to immunotherapy in inflammatory bowel disease. And the other thing to keep in mind, like when we talk about genetic medicine, you've got categories of things, and immunotherapy, precision medicine, these are all things that have significant crossover. That does not mean that each one is doing the same thing. It's not all about putting mRNA into a lipid nanoparticle and delivering it to somebody for use as a vaccine. But there's lots of crossover in terms, like when we say immunotherapy and we compare it to gene therapy, there's significant crossover. Just another one here, which for the sake of time, again, we won't go through in full, but I'm going to make these available for everybody. And last but not least, on the scientific side, I highly recommend Dr. Jeff Payne, who has been looking from the perspective of, are the products that Q Biologics developing safe? He's looking more from that perspective. Are they working? And in this article, for example, he does touch on, DNA, RNA, and he specifically does compare them to and describes the Pfizer, Moderna products and Q Biologics. And he gives some context as to how they're interrelated at a certain level. So that's just kind of a walkthrough of why we came to write what we wrote. But to be clear, we're not stating that Q Biologics is making mRNA vaccines just like Pfizer and Moderna. That is not what we intended to say. And it may be beneficial for us to clarify that in the article. What are your thoughts, Kristin?
At the moment, I think that it stands the way it's written, that it's furthering the march of the same gene-based technology that underlies the mRNA injections. And what's said after that in the article, I'm not going to be able to quote precisely, but is a bit of a call for people to just be aware of the entire spectrum of gene-based medicine. And that's not to say there isn't an application that's productive that comes out of that whole arena, but more that like we're operating out of a place where, we're kind of hardwired to react to the idea of an injection that might alter us genetically as these things were rolled out over the last few years. But when something similar, and I'm not saying that in the case of Q Biologics, that's an appropriate word to use, but I think there's a lot of examples where it's being presented as a positive immune enhancer, innate immune enhancer, when like that's also literally the definition that's applied to vaccines all the time. Yeah. So just that people don't fall for like this kind of application over here, really bad, but this kind of application over here actually supports nature, and just to pay attention, I guess. But yeah, I think we should move on and maybe not go back to the Coulson-Torma conversation anymore. I don't, off the top of my head, think that there's any point in doing that. But just to say, this company, NanoBioSim, comes up because Foster Coulson also has this investment company that invests in NanoBioSim, and he, acknowledges that that's true, and that he's met Anita Goel, the founder. I believe she is the founder, and so that's also been an interesting topic of research for a number of other people. And I think that it's worth just looking at what this company has actually developed or is developing. We did have an individual, I don't think that we should name her, who has a degree from Yale in a relevant field and worked for investment firms interested in investing in biotech companies, look at these companies among other people and give us some feedback. And one of the things she said was, it's really interesting. NanoBioSim is really interesting because it's been around for a while and it has all these really high level connections with certain individuals like John Kerry and others. But it's not presenting itself as, it doesn't look like it's trying to attract investors, right? So it's not, she found it odd and then went in and looked at the actual products and pointed out that there's all of these contracts, or it's won all of these awards from military and government agencies. And so, now, it seems like super duper sketch to me. And the main product that they have is their gene radar testing system that appears to be a rapid, reliable, like next generation test that can make the PCR test obsolete, that can be connected to a device. So either it is itself operational in a device, or in other places on the website, you can see like that there's the possibility of connecting it to a smartphone, and it doesn't have to be blood. That can test for like unique genetic fingerprints. It can be saliva. So it's this this trend of making rapid, reliable, possibly what's the word I'm trying to think of? Repeated, right? Testing for genetic data available to people that they could even like literally be carrying around with them. Mm-hmm. And so let's cue up the video for the gene radar test and watch it.
Let's do it.
We are harnessing over 20 years of research at the frontier of physics, biomedicine, and nanotechnology to bring to you a platform called Gene Radar that will decentralize, mobilize, and even personalize your healthcare experience. Gene Radar is a mobile diagnostic device that allows you to diagnose any disease with a genetic fingerprint in real time at a cheaper price with gold standard accuracy. The gold standard of medical diagnosis today is based on an old Nobel Prize-winning technology called PCR. PCR is the foundation of a multi-billion-dollar molecular diagnostics industry that relies on bulky, expensive machines. We are bringing you the next generation, real-time, gold standard, mobilized diagnostics. We are revolutionizing how you diagnose disease. By placing blood or saliva into a nanochip, we can rapidly analyze genetic fingerprints at the nanoscale. We have harnessed our unique capabilities to precision control nanomachines as they read and write DNA. This enables real-time, continuous monitoring of your health.
How nice.
Real-time continuous. So we should probably just define this biometadata is the new oil or the new gold picture a little bit, especially because just making the transition and understanding from, it's one thing if you got a PCR test or nose swab and you're worried your genetic information was taken because you were tested. It's another thing to be introduced to the idea that what's really valuable is constant testing, not just of an individual over the course of their whole life, but a family, a community, a particular ethnic group, any other, kind of different demographic or population. So you can be collecting data continuously to create the metadata picture, right? And there's all of these applications of AI also coming into that to spit out conclusions and directives or whatever.
Right. And what you're describing is the general concern, like this idea where we've got now an era where, let's say with COVID, where you had, for some reason, as everyone I'm sure listening at this point is fully aware, you've got sort of this nonsensical decision to mass roll out PCR, polymerase chain reaction tests. Like PCR, again, as I'm sure most people understand now, is you take a sample, a bio sample, and you amplify it. Then you amplify it again, and then you analyze it. And so the idea was, if you do that, you take a biosample, a swab up someone's nose, which contains genetic material on it, which it's your genetic material combined with whatever microorganisms you either have all the time or have been introduced to, and you amplify it to whatever point, then you can identify the presence of a pathogen such that it is meaningful. And that's sort of a weird, it doesn't hold up really in terms of a logical
It's
way
the
to
claim.
actually, what's that?
It's the claim.
It's the claim.
Right.
And it's not to say it's a useless technology either. Just like everything we're saying, it's not like this or that. There's nuance here. So you've got a world in COVID where now everyone is taking a test, you know, some people multiple times a day. And what we actually had happen, this isn't hypothetical, is we had companies who were selling, we had governments, I believe, who were selling the used swabs, the genetic samples that were taken from people to other parties. I think one big story was that it wound up in China. And that's not to say bad guy China. It's to say there's, as you described, there is value. These are valuable items. Just like a good example is the way, like you say, first data is the new oil. Now genetic data is the new data. And you've got your entire profile. You know, we all understand this, that the digital thumbprint, the digital, you know, footprint you leave online is hugely valuable, and you can pay a lot of money to receive data on your target audience or whatever. This is now standard practice, and we all know this. That's why we attempt to, you know, guard against it with VPNs and this or that. So that is what the concern is now, that you have that same level of commerciality, you know, of genetic information, which there's all sorts of ways that could be misused. So that's the general concern behind this industry. Am I right? That's why we're kind of going into this a little.
Yeah, and just to add, because Michael Caine, who is was a public school teacher in New York City, and he was fired for not getting the injection. He actually sued the New York City DOE, the Department of Education, to force the companies that were providing and collecting the tests that were being administered on all of the public school kids in the greater metropolitan area of New York City, these PCR tests all the time, basically to force them to have to tell the public whether or not they were selling or even collecting the genetic data from those tests. And you could probably look this up. It's like Caine versus NYC DOE. I know Mary Holland and Michael Sussman, I believe, were lawyers in that case, and they won. And I think there were 3 companies. Anyways, ultimately in the end, like, it was revealed and it became clear that yes, indeed, they were collecting genetic data from those tests. And the claim is that it's then anonymized, right? So it's apparently completely fair game to collect this genetic information as long as you separate it from the actual personal information, you know, of who that genetic data came from. And that really matters, because if you go online and you research this a little bit, what you'll find, and I don't know why, I haven't looked closely enough at it, is that it's apparently really easy to reverse the anonymizing. And so there's like this whole debate going on about whether or not it really becomes anonymous, because apparently it's easy to somehow connect it back to its source again. So, and yeah, I mean, companies were found to be selling this aggregate, you know, genetic data to other companies and companies in other countries. Yeah. So, and that's important, because this is probably one of the most important things for people to pay attention to, is like anywhere where this information could be collected moving forward.
And this is why this is so important for people to be able to discuss things like this, because again, back to the social media thing, the kind of example, you've got these long you sign up for a social media platform in 2008 and they've got their long terms and conditions and no one reads them. You skip to the bottom, you hit go. Well, turns out, as we well know now, that is where you signed away the right to all of that data that we talked about before. Well, that was the result of not being fully transparent, obviously. That was the result of lack of informed consent. You can't have consent if it's not informed. And that's what Facebook did. That's what Google does, is they managed to weasel their way past that part of the process. So the concern is that, given just on its face, that's what PCR is, and this is how PCR has been used in the last few years. And NanoBioSim specifically made one for SARS-CoV-2. They made a COVID test. It's not just they're in the same industry. The point is, people who are using these, it's not at all clear. I know in my experience in the COVID testing era, like, I got no information to suggest that my data might be used, my genetic samples might be used in any other context. And as far as I understand, neither did Michael Caine or any of the other folks involved in that particular lawsuit. So the idea is to go, hold on, slow down. Do we really know what the whole picture of this company or this industry is? Like, do we understand all the implications to just kind of jumping into using one of these services, given what we know about how these things go? But in the case of NanoBioSim in particular, it's going to take me a sec maybe to pull up the page. We're not, again, hypothesizing that these are, not bad intentioned people. That's not what I mean. I mean, potentially conflicted people, because on the advisory team for NanoBioSim in particular, you've got, for example, Robert Langer, who was a co-founder of Moderna, like the exact product that has raised so many of our alarms, and so, I mean, that on its own, that's a big one for me. That's a big, like, this isn't hypothetical that this company has links to the same folks that we're already raising alarms about. You know
listen
what I mean?
to this, Liam. Can I read this quote? This is off NanoBioSim's website.
Okay.
But it's one of those like tickers where the quotes move. And so instead of pulling up the page, I'm just going to read the quote, but people can find it on there. Quote, DARPA is an agency that funds extremely innovative, high-risk, high-reward research to accelerate the realization of disruptive technologies and the capabilities developed by Dr. Goel at NanoBioSim could potentially revolutionize the fields of pathogen sensing detection, energy harvesting, and biomolecular computation. If this indeed is the century of biology and biotechnology, as many leading scientific thinkers are predicting, her work is going to provide one of the key underpinnings for the coming revolution. End quote, Dr. Krishnan, former DARPA program manager. And here we have under her, Anita Goel's bio on the website. As chairman and CEO of NanoBioSim and NanoBioSim Diagnostics, Dr. Goel has harnessed these fundamental insights to invent, incubate, and start commercializing next generation nanotechnology platforms like GeneRadar for mobile and personalized health, energy harvesting, and quantum computing with molecular nanomachines that read and write information in DNA. Her pioneering works have been recognized globally by prestigious honors and awards, including multiple awards from the US government agencies such as DARPA, DOD, DOE, AFOSR, NSF, USAID, HHS, and most recently was awarded the X Prize by Nokia Sensing X Challenge. So just, I mean, I don't really know that more needs to be said. People can just go there and look at what it is.
So that's why we have questions about NanoBioSim. Okay.
Yeah, and so I think what I'd like to do is, if it's okay with you, to jump back to one point in the Colson-Torma conversation where one of Amazing Polly's questions was asked. And this question is about the company Unjected that was founded by an individual named Shelby Hosanna. And then at a certain point, the wellness company, I guess, purchased it. I'm not totally sure, but Foster Colson has himself listed as the owner. And so it's now another company in this portfolio of companies. And I think that we should listen to her question and his answer.
Okay, let's do it.
Let me see here. So she's talking about, are there any products or services offered through Unjected, such as unvaccinated breast milk or sperm? Are there plans to offer such products?
I mean, personally, I think if there's a market for injected sperm, I mean, why wouldn't we? But at this point in time, it's focused on helping people connect.
All right, that's probably good enough, Liam. So are there any products or services, offered by Unjected, such as unvaccinated, what was it, blood and sperm?
I think those are the two he got out.
Okay. All right, and then let's jump to an interview that Shelby Hosanna, she's not just the founder of Unjected, she's also the spokesperson, which makes a lot of sense because she's very attractive. And that could just be a really excellent business coincidence. I'm not sure. But anyways, she's definitely selling the products, I'm sure. And so this is an interview she did with Karine in October of 2023. And most of this conversation revolves around blood. It's really interesting. And so let's just listen to what she says about what they offer.
Now, Kristin, if I turn my camera off and you turn your camera off, I can go full screen with the video. So let's try that.
Okay. Sure.
Okay.
Dates? I mean, you explain it. For people who've been unvaccinated, I want to talk about this for a couple minutes. What is unjected.com?
Absolutely. So Unjected, you gave a perfect description, but we are a platform for unvaccinated humans to connect for dating, friendships, community, and of course, very importantly, blood and fertility listings as well, because we believe that this is going to be a continuous issue into the future. But we call ourselves the repopulation agenda. We're essentially helping fight this depopulation agenda with exactly the opposite, which is to help find healthy partners and create more beautiful unvaccinated sovereign babies into this world. And so if it is something that's important to you, we know that spike protein exposure is absolutely dangerous. You do not want to have a partner that has the spike protein, the synthetic mRNA. And even as far as going to, close friendships, working in a close environment with vaccinated individuals, we don't know what the long-term health consequences are going to be yet. So if you're looking to connect with, like-minded people who respect your views and, are medical autonomous and believe in medical freedom, you can definitely find them there. And, like I mentioned earlier, and what Anne also has done some incredible work on is the directed blood donation. And that is something that is really significant right now because people are being denied the right to choose their directed donor, which, should never be the case. You have, informed consent should tell you that, you potentially could be receiving a blood transfusion that has mRNA in it or was given by a vaccinated individual. You know, there's no testing system done by the Red Cross. So, you know, even the most fragile infants in the NICU could get a transfusion of blood that might not work for them. And we have the right to choose our designated donor, even if, you know, as a religious preference. So, you know, Unjected and several other organizations, we do have a coalition called the Alliance of Blood Coalition. And it's us, Safe Blood, Pure Blood Registry, a couple of other amazing organizations. And we're all coming together to advocate for that because right now, especially as unvaccinated individuals, you know, we can protect ourselves from partners or friendships, but we also need to think about emergency situations. What will happen to our blood, our organ donations, fertility, like eggs, sperm, breast milk? These are all things that we need to really take care of because if we know anything about the cardiac,
Okay, Liam, you could probably stop it there.
Okay, and I see in the chat, Polly said that the video keeps glitching. Unfortunately, it's entirely possible it is, but I'm going to drop the link in the chat so people can, if you didn't hear the important bits, you can revisit it independently. Okay, so that, I mean, that is a very interesting video clip, obviously. What part of it is most notable to you, Kristin?
Well, of course, she's making clear that Unjected actually isn't just there to connect unvaccinated people seeking partners or love or marriage or community or friends. She goes on to talk about that, but that it also is a place where you can have access to what she calls blood and fertility listings. So that's a little tricky because it could be that they're just asking people, they're supporting through a facilitation process, members match with other people in their region who are seeking such things, which is what it sounds like. And so is that a service? You know, is that providing a service? I don't know, but it sounds like it. And then also this Alliance of Blood Coalition, working with some of these other groups that we'll also get into and to look at a little bit, because I think it's important, this new trend. And just to say a couple things about it, you know, because it's been like a pretty hot topic, especially with the Red Cross, not distinguishing, publicly claiming they don't distinguish between vaccinated or uninjected with mRNA blood donations. And then recently, as far as I understand it, they added a question, which is, have you been vaccinated recently? And then when kind of this is the Red Cross, kind of pressed about why that question was there, they claim if you have, you know, symptoms from having received recently an injection, you shouldn't come in and give blood. But it's just been a hot topic in the mRNA injection adverse world. And of course, there's all this research and conversation and intrigue and concern about what effect the mRNA injections have to the blood and to your whole system altogether, how long the spike protein lasts, whether spike protein is even a real thing, like all this controversy around that. And so, yeah, I want to make clear, I am not interested in negating anyone's concern here with regards to wanting to partner with, procreate with, you know, grow within the womb or receive or give blood to people who have not gotten these mRNA injections. That makes sense to me, that would be an interest for people. But I also Yeah, it's like Matthew Crawford said in his video, which I recommend if you are going to go watch the Jim Torma Foster Colson interview. Matthew Crawford on his platform, Rounding the Earth, he made a video called Breaking Down the Foster Colson interview. And his commentary with Unjected was like, I'm not that comfortable with it. It feels like it has shades of eugenics, right? And so there is this tone in there of like, hey, you know, come on, like it is a little bit thirst trapping going on, right? With these images and the people and the sexy guy and the sexy lady. And the tagline now is the repopulation agenda. But you also have to like sign an affidavit that you're unvaccinated. And I think we should look at a sample of what people sign and then go back and listen to, maybe not go back and listen to Shelby if it's glitchy. That's too bad. But I can tell you what she says later in the interview about how you go through that process of becoming verified as unvaccinated, and then how you have access to lists, right? Like reproductive lists or blood donation lists. So let's look at this sample as attestation that one has to sign. This is on their website. You would have to fill out and submit. And it starts with, I attest that I have not received any doses of a COVID vaccine, mRNA or otherwise. I further attest that I do not plan to receive a COVID vaccine. That makes sense. I consent to allowing Unjected and telemedicine partner, the wellness company, to request my state vaccination record to confirm my status. Put a pin in that. I agree that if I change my mind and decide for whatever reason to receive a COVID vaccine, I will alert Unjected and voluntarily revoke my verified status. Okay. By completing this attestation, I agreed to sharing my non-vaccinated medical status with other members of Unjected community. I understand that falsifying information may amount in sexual misconduct in certain jurisdictions, and Unjected could tell everyone. And then you click yes or no, and then there's authorization for the use and disclosure of protected health information. So I request that my protected health information regarding my care and treatment be released as set forth on this form. I understand that I authorize the wellness company and its third-party contractors or affiliates to retrieve and disclose my health record and protected health information to the wellness company. I understand the health records retrieved may not be a complete 100% comprehensive record, and these records may not be useful for diagnostic purposes. These health records will be shared with the wellness company authorized providers to ensure great healthcare services. I understand and request that the following information may be retrieved and disclosed with the wellness company: available medical record history, evaluation records and patient summaries, x-ray reports, lab reports, hospital records and reports, immunizations, prescription data, consultation documents, surgical reports. So, on the one hand, like if this exists on the wellness company site, it's clear, like any other healthcare provider out there, you want access to your patients' prior, right, health records so that you can provide them with the best service that and so that's the argument here for getting that. But like, why is signing a form that's an affidavit so that you can be verified as being unvaccinated for a dating site, facilitating all of this data going to the wellness company?
Yes, that's a really good point. We have to put everything into context here. At the moment, we're looking at a dating site, Unjected. We're not talking about somebody signing up for telehealth services with the wellness company or getting a prescription or transferring their doctor. That's not what we're doing. We are looking at the sign up, the sample. It's listed as sample attestation. So we're looking at, presumably, if this is correct, what they have people sign up with just to get access to the dating part. That,
Yes.
as you're saying, that's pretty, I don't want to say invasive, because of course it's all voluntary. You're choosing to provide all of that. It just seems, I don't know. I haven't really used the online dating scene, but I was under the impression that these were not things that you had to provide. But I will say, at least in theory, like if you want to create a voluntary community of people, like that, I don't have a problem with. And the things in here, like as you're going through, you're going, okay, makes sense. In the context of what they're trying to create, there are some of these things that make sense. Like I attest that I'm not vaccinated, and the whole point is because you're trying to meet people who are unvaccinated. So it's not saying that there's necessarily, that's not what we take issue with here. The question is, the big question mark is over the exceptional amount of medical data they are having you authorize them to claim, you know?
Right. And as we move forward and look at some of these alliance partners, you know, it raises other concerns that Unjected also is participating in at least linking people up to each other under some kind of facilitated process, or potentially these other companies that are doing this like direct blood donation and fertility, I don't know, donations.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something about the data breach that occurred with Unjected?
Yeah, and look, I'm no expert on what happened here, but I'm just going to pull this up. There was an issue that, you know, I think Unjected has, they've been very forthright about this. I'm not saying they did anything, you know, like it can just be they had bad data policies at the time. I don't know, but there was, the reason this is important and the reason why, at least hypothetically, things like HIPAA exist. Like medical data is very, it's very important. It's very personal, and it can be used to hurt you if in the wrong hands.
Mm-hmm.
And so early on, there was apparently a situation where Unjected, I believe the website was left in a specific mode that allowed, like a debug mode, that allowed this techie guy to go in and see private medical information. And as with all of these, I will drop this article in the chat in a minute, but we bring that up because, again, remember, Foster Coulson said when he was asked if, you know, all of this bodily fluid stuff was part of the wellness company currently, or if there were any plans to. Well, at the time, I believe prior to the wellness company taking control of Unjected, to be clear, they did have in their infrastructure a setup for sperm. As you can see, the heading on this particular listing is Legendary Sperm of the Gods. Impressive. But with, you know, in this case, a city, you've got a system that has all of this private information that people have provided related to sperm and such, that was made vulnerable. That was made vulnerable to anybody who knew how to look at it, I believe, through just looking at the page source. So this is why this is important. It's not hypothetical. This already has resulted in, like there has been an instance where this specific service did have an issue with data protection. And again, I believe they've been forthright about it. I believe they let everyone know. I'm not saying they didn't do that, but just to offer that and to put a timeline on Unjected's dipping into the bodily fluids thing, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe since we probably don't want to try to go back to that video and play another clip, I can just read, or I can just repeat in my own words, basically. If you watch further in that video, Karine asks her, Shelby, how you wind up, like the process of signing up, how you wind up verified, and how you can have access to these different lists. And at one point, Shelby even says, She recommends, becoming a member because that's how you will get access to our verified blood directory system. And then she describes in this process of like filling out the affidavit that you work with, she says, an unverified nurse who helps verify all that information. And then you can request, or they ask you if you want to be added to these different lists as a donor or someone interested. And we don't know if they're using another company again to do that, or not. So, but I think we should move on to look at a couple of these coalition partners, starting with Pure Bloods, because you already covered Pure Bloods in fall of last year.
Yeah, this was for people want to know kind of how we got to this point. This was for me where this all started, was looking at this whole concept of purity in the blood. And as you say, like there's some kind of dark implications in the name. But long story short, I'm just dropping the link in the chat right now. I looked into this one, as a case study, this specific group responding, by the way, to these very real concerns. Like, let's be very clear here. We are not saying that the concept is incorrect or baseless. That's not at all what we're saying. So I wanted to try to understand how it was being done, as we're talking about now. And in this case, Pure Blood, it's set up as like a private membership organization, and you can buy in, and there's different tiers, and you can be just a donor or you can be a recipient. And the idea is, again, a good idea, that you have the ability to not only choose, who you want to receive your blood transfusion from if you need one, but also knowing that you've got it available to you in the event of an emergency, or if you want to stock your own blood. Like, again, all kind of makes sense. So that's what Pure Blood was offering. But the issue I had, as we've talked about, is the periphery, the people working with these platforms, and the systems in which they're delivering these services. And in particular, I was concerned about this one, My ID, and we don't need to get into it too much now. But My ID, basically, they're like a digital health ID company who was part of the discussion around East Palestine, Ohio, when the Norfolk Southern train crashed, and they basically blew it up and detonated a chemical weapon for some reason. And My ID had just prior to that begun the process of either signing people up to receive these My IDs in preparation for just such a disaster, or they hadn't yet distributed them. It's unclear. Point is, this was concerning, and there were some weird links between My ID and some other groups that came up. But I want to say, after I published this piece, and I was making the point that, look, these are some concerning, not far from these groups at all are Big Pharma and are the government. Like, this data, once again, is being shared potentially with the CDC, for example, the exact organizations that we're trying to exclude ourselves from, or at least we're trying to prevent, over disclosure of private medical information. And at the end of this process, I want to say, I did get an email from the gentleman who runs Pure Blood Registry, Gil Levy, and he told me that that he, following this reporting, decided to cut ties with My ID. And I want to give credit where credit is due. That is the outcome, I suppose. If there is a concern there, then that is the outcome one would hope to see. So credit to Gil Levy for doing that. But it, of course, doesn't fully address the problem here, where you've got not only Pure Blood Registry and not only My ID kind of doing their own things, but they do have this coalition, apparently. This one specific one, Coalition of Blood, I think it was called. But it's not the only one. Like, these groups are linked up in other ways as well. And it's really unclear to what degree they're sharing information. If you've got Shelby saying that this coalition is joined together to advance the intended outcome of gaining more access to, the kind of blood you need or want, then that sort of sounds like that involves data sharing. But there's no real clarity on if that is happening. So if you get Pure Blood Registry, who perhaps has demonstrated, a degree of interest in not getting involved with kind of shady organizations, well, what about the others in this alliance, you see? And if there is data sharing going on, what does that mean for people who have consented, for example, to unject it? Presumably they have something in place, that prevents that from being shared. But do we know that for sure is the question. As a concern.
Can I interject, Liam, just to say, so we don't forget that the wellness company is also a partner.
Yes.
And listed as a partner of Pure Blood Registry. So at least the wellness company must be using the services that Pure Blood Registry provides for its members, or offering, the services to its members, or a discount or something's going on, right? So there already is that relationship there. And I just also want to say, given Gil Levy's, supposed cutting ties with MyID, that MyID was used to, with regards to what's called a living will. And so these blood organizations or entities, because this one's a PMA, they offer support with filling out what's called a living will for people, so that if there's an emergency, and it's like scary, you probably do want this, and you're in a car accident, you wind up in the hospital, there's something filled out already that makes clear what you do want and what you don't want for your treatment, and that they're also helping do advocacy for you in that regard. And Pure Blood Registry had on its website, huge in red, encouraging people to sign up with MyID and get the highest level membership with MyID in order to fill out this living will. And when Gil Levy communicated with you, he also said, gosh, we didn't, thanks for pointing this out. Of course, we don't want to be working with companies that are connected to the pharmaceutical industry, so we're taking it down. And, you could, hopefully that's true. Hopefully that relationship is actually over. But of course, just to emphasize, the concern there was that MyID, which is basically a biodata, or at least a health information data collecting company via devices, was the company being used to help you fill out your health information in case you had an accident. So yeah. Do you want to move on to another Coalition of Blood Alliance member?
Yeah. So the other one that she mentions there, and by the way, just to be clear, I haven't been able myself to find anything about this Coalition of Blood Alliance beyond what Shelby said. So it sounds like something that's in the works, or is an idea or informal. And that's unfortunate. I wish there was more out there, but this is the other organization that was mentioned, Safe Blood Donation. Now this is a very interesting organization. Just the cliff notes, it was based in, I think, Switzerland. Yeah, Zurich, Switzerland. But then it relocated in June 2023 to Zambia. Now there may be some dynamics that explain that we don't know. But it has been interesting, trying to understand what this organization is. And it's also got some very interesting connections. And I wonder which are the ones you'd like to point out.
Well, just in a nutshell, so Safe Blood sort of appears to be the international version of Pure Blood Registry. If Pure Blood is servicing within the United States, I don't know, certain states or region or something, Safe Blood is operating on the global level, anyways, per their own description. They're operating in or have members in over 55 countries in the world and every state in the United States, though different countries and different states in the US, have different barriers as far as what they're trying to provide their members with. But that's just the scale itself is notable. There's a sister project, which is Safe Reproduction. So there's Safe Blood, and then there's Safe Reproduction, and Safe Reproduction offers, access to unvaccinated eggs, sperm, breast milk, etc. So same little gambit of bio samples. And they have some representatives from different areas. And actually, I would love some crowdsourcing help with this particular one, which is the guy who's the representative from Africa, because I'm going to have to pull his name up. I don't have it in front of me unless you have it over there. He resides in or just outside of Lusaka, Zambia. And the only kind of online source I could find on this guy is a Facebook page that places him as currently employed with the Ministry of Health of Zambia. So what the relationship is between this global safe blood donation organization and Zambia seems worth exploring.
And it's, to be clear, it's sort of unclear if that guy is indeed the guy. We're still trying to figure this out.
Kabaso Kapema, he's the team leader from Africa. Yeah. Watch that information disappear, but maybe not. And, so it was founded by George Della Pietra, who's a Swiss, according to their information, he's a Swiss naturopath. He has kind of his own story. He hooked up with some colleagues, some scientists. They took some blood samples from mRNA vaccinated individuals and not. They looked at those samples under dark microscopy, and they have on their website pictures that they claim show like the different state, the visual representation from these studies that they did, the research that they did into the different, kinds of blood. And then there's these stories of, children getting or adults getting transfusions and having issues. So even though the founder is Swiss, there's an individual named Clinton Ohlers who is the rep for the United States, as far as I can tell, and also the PR guy. He's like the media relations guy, and so he has been, and he's an American citizen. He's been, doing a lot of interviews, and he's an interesting character. I initially looked into him a little bit. I don't know how much we want to go into his background, and I don't know what it all means, but I guess for myself, speak for myself personally, I find it concerning, and so I think it's worth sharing this information, but I'm encouraging people to think for themselves. So Clinton Ohlers, first of all, I kind of like the guy because he's really intelligent and he's articulate and he's a real scholar. And I find that stimulating, even if, the academic circle you're working with is focused on something I don't like or agree with or might think is nonsense. I just appreciate real intellectual conversation, and I find him very scholarly. And so he has a background in history. He's a historian of religion and science, and he has been he's worked in different academic settings and on different projects, including a think tank at one point. focused on the very compelling question of like how to resolve what might present itself as a completely irresolvable conflict between like our modern understanding of the world and creationism, basically, like our theological Christian understanding of the beginning of the human race and all of this stuff.
We're getting deep here, Kristin.
I know, sorry. I'll try to wrap it up. I think it's really fascinating. But so he has these conversations, he attends these conferences. You know, this is years ago, as far as I can tell, but a big part of his biography is focused on the intellectual conversation around like Adam and the genome. You understand? Like the historical Adam, the biblical Adam, the genealogical Adam, right? These different ways of understanding the birth of the humankind, let's say. And so in some of these conversations, interestingly, I found in a great conversation he has with another author that was on Facebook, and it's not there anymore. Just today I saw it's just gone. But it's really like, it's lively and warm and collegial and pretty fascinating. And they're talking about all this stuff. But Clinton Ohlers is using terms like he's referring to populations, certain groups of people in the world as breeding populations. And so you start to get these terms that are coming out where you're like, ooh, wow, that's like, what is the conversation about here? And it feels dangerously close to eugenics, right? Or it's just like one toe in the water, or could easily kind of take a step in that direction. It's clear that they're discussing trends in genealogical, historical trends in populations. So, and then there's all of this other kind of crazy parts of his picture, like he and his brother co-founded I sent this to you in the notes. I don't know if you want to pull this up. It was like a UN link. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, forgive me. I just have I've been watching the chat. It has been just full of, it looks like at least 3 just straight up trolls. And I bring this up because it's taken me all this time to figure out which ones are even.
I'm just going to completely ignore it because, of course, we knew that was going to happen.
Yes, but just speaking to those who have been asking me to address it, this is the first time I've had a chance to even click on individual bios and see oh, this one was created today. Okay, that's obviously not
right. Okay.
So anyway, sorry, back to it. And just so you guys know, just so everyone knows, we are coming up to the end, and we in relatively soon, and we appreciate you sticking with us. Okay. So you see this, Kristin?
Yeah. So just, I think that Clinton Ohlers was listed as a director of the International Human Development Corps, and his brother Curtis Ohlers founded it. And yes, I can't even remember like the descriptions in the notes. It's like was founded in Panama. Is there a description if you go down here under there? No. Okay. I don't know. I'll find it.
Perhaps, for another discussion,
another session. And his brother definitely has a really interesting LinkedIn, his education history. Sorry, that's my dog. And Clinton Ohlers too. I mean, they're just really they're highly educated. His brother was London School of Economics. Is that true? And then they both wind up also connected to these right-wing neocon think tank and media companies that maybe I'll let you talk about a little bit.
Yeah, give me just one.
I don't know how much we want to cover it, but it's just, you know, it's like yeah.
I'd like to cover it another time when we can give it more.
Okay.
Attention, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's
fine.
fine.
It is worth going into on its own, but it's yeah. Let's give it its proper day, I think.
Do we want to just skip all of the rest of what we had planned then?
Well, let's take a look at our list here.
I mean, we had some segments of Ohlers talking about what Safe Blood offers and how they're developing testing.
So we've got this. Yeah, let's look at that. This is on the Michael Gaeta show.
Yeah, do from the 17-30-minute mark to about 22 minutes.
Okay. Hold tight. 17:30. All right, here we go.
That they are permanently coded to produce spike.
Yeah.
But this is, pretty serious. So one thing you mentioned that I think wasn't the case before was you mentioned testing. And I know that was something that on our last conversation, you indicated was sort of in process, being explored. What's the update on testing for the blood and for individuals?
Well, lots to share there.
Sure.
So just last week, not even 7 days ago, I was on the phone with my colleagues at Safe Blood, and we were discussing this with two scientists who have developed what they were focusing on is mRNA and DNA testing in the blood for that free-floating mRNA. Because now we know that that's lasting for some people at least 30 days out, right? And all we know is that as long as it's been tested, it's been found. So we don't know what the outer limit is. We know that, hey, if we test for it at 28 days, guess what? We find it at 28 days still.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, but that's just the mRNA and DNA. There's a question of what happens if the mRNA is no longer circulating in the blood, but it's in the cells producing spike.
Exactly. That's
right?
what I was thinking. It may not be in the blood, it may be in the tissue.
So that means we need also to have a spike tests as well. So what we need to do is the technology is increasingly there,
right,
to come up with a test. And there's a difference between what a test and what we might call examination of the blood, right? So if we have to draw a vial and send it to a laboratory, that's going to take time, right? But if we could come up with something that is more rapid,
right,
where it could be done quickly in hospital. Let's say you need you're in the hospital in an emergency situation, you or your health advocate is saying, hey, this person hasn't been exposed to mRNA. We want to make sure there's no spike and there's no mRNA in the blood that you don't give them. And we want a test that could do that.
Okay. So where it's at now is there is a test for the blood for mRNA and possibly DNA?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it exists.
Okay. And what's going to be the availability of that? If that was just like a bench test, that's
we're trying to make it widely available. That's what our conversation was about. And we started, for example, the Safe Blood Foundation.
Right.
About 6 months ago. And the purpose of the Safe Blood Foundation, actually not even 6 months, back in May, maybe.
Sure.
So it was in May, but that's how recent it is. Okay. And the purpose of the Safe Blood Foundation is that is a charitable foundation to raise money to do this kind of research, because two important things can happen if we can get this testing. One is that we will be able to put into people's hands something that I just described that they can use to say to the hospitals, because right now the hospitals just say, well, we don't segregate the blood. We don't think there's a problem. And anyhow, there's no way to know anyhow. So you just got to take what they give you. But that puts something powerful in people's hands. The other thing is just what we were talking about. Like, is there reverse transcription going on? If so, how severe is it? What's going on with it? We need to be testing the population much more at large to have a better understanding of the life cycle of this in the human body and the societal life cycle, if you will. In other words, if we all stop taking mRNA vaccines tomorrow,
Right.
When is the tipping point of where the total population returns to what we were? I would really like to know that.
You're not alone.
Yeah.
For sure.
And think of what that allows us to do with a blood supply. Like if we
Mhm.
find out that that's not happening, then we know we have a much more urgent situation. If we find out that that is happening, then we can start making things more available as, say, we gradually work ourselves out of this crisis. We can say,
Yeah.
okay, here's more people who are more segment of the population who have returned their bodies to normal, their blood safe again. That's what I'd love to see. I mean, that's what I'm hoping.
Yes.
Hey, Liam, you can
And then,
end that clip
you know,
there.
some people.
Yeah. And I'm with you. He's very articulate, very reasonable. And again, he's discussing a very real problem. And presenting a solution.
He's also discussing needing to test like the entire population.
Right.
That is also what he's discussing. And he's discussing a rapid, reliable testing mechanism that needs to be put in the hands of the patient in the hospital room. So, I mean, those are the concerns, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it all comes back though to informed consent, because the ability to test for something is not itself bad. It's how the thing is used, how the ability is, then exercised. And so like, I just speaking for myself, like everything we've talked about, like the idea that you can buy a specific brand of vitamins online is on its own not a good or a bad thing. The fact that you can go on a dating site that is for a specific, let's say unvaccinated group, that's not on its own a bad thing. The fact that you can arrange for a specific, setup of blood transfusion where you feel confident that you're getting something that you're confident is safe, that's a good thing, I think. And again, like the ability for those who want to have their blood tested, like I know that's a good thing because there are instances where people need that in order to figure out what's going on. The problem is if we're looking at a situation where this is becoming so ubiquitous so quickly from so many different angles that people don't know what they're signing up for. And so if somebody is in some way, dipping their toes into something like a pure blood registry or a safe blood donation, they have to know the full extent of what they're signing up for. I know for me, that's my concern, is just, yeah.
The other concern is that it's specifically soliciting an unvaccinated network of people. So that also raises questions, because we have blood testing happening all over the place anyways, right? But in these cases, what stands out is the potential for like list building, health history, personal data, and biodata on the unvaccinated and on mRNA injected population, as many people as possible. So that raises questions about like control group research. And also this is probably statistically the community of people who refused testing, which means they may not have had their genetic information taken from them yet, et cetera. So it just raises those kinds of questions also about like surveillance, actually monitoring people and surveillance, especially over time.
Which is, again, part of why, for me, the idea of describing people as either pure blood or not, if you've just got two groups, anytime you can divide people into boxes and get their behavior to change as a result of that, like these are divide and conquer techniques that are just too effective. And I don't like that myself. Now, do we want to move into the question of, do we want to move to the question of, is this really a parallel system being set up?
Sure.
So, and for the sake of time, and I'm going to have to go to the bathroom at some point, but we do just want to touch on something very related to what we've just said, which is, how do I get over here? So, the wellness company, again, like circling all the way back. So the wellness company has grown very fast. and they appear to be offering, like, it seems like they're just offering everything. And as I was going through their website, finding that they offer directly. So under the wellness company banner, not, for Unjected or for anything else. Like, one of the things they offer is diagnostic testing through various existing services. One of them is Get Labs, and we'll look at that in a sec. And to be clear again, obviously, there's a lot of contexts I could think of where it would be the correct, like, medically speaking, thing to do to have a diagnostic test done. You get blood work done, and there's not that many places to get it done. But I know here, in Canada, for example, we've only got a couple, and they're very centralized, very institutional. So you got the wellness company offering diagnostic testing services through Get Labs, for example. And what we're going to ask is this consistent with the wellness company kind of vision of creating a parallel health system, or is this in effect just kind of tapping into the system that already exists? And to answer that, I mean, there are other companies that people might know better, like LabCorp, or there's Quest Diagnostics. I wasn't familiar with Get Labs, but after looking into it just a little bit, I like going to their website, if I may. So this is Get Labs, and they appear to be, a smaller kind of venture. But as you go through, you find that they are still connected in. They're partnered with the LabCorp and the Quest Diagnostics. And so, okay, A to B, B to C, you're still in the context of getting diagnostics done. It's still the same organizations, the same kind of centralized medical system that we're used to. And then in our discussion we had about this, you pointed out, okay, but does such an alternative even exist? Can you get testing done outside of these companies? And that's a good question. And my thought was maybe not, but it's definitely not the impression I get when I go to the wellness company's website and I listen to Foster Coulson. I don't get the impression that we're simply tapping into a medical system that still exists. This feels more like, I don't know. I have concerns about this as well. This to me doesn't necessarily feel like an alternative. And Get Labs in particular has some very interesting people behind it. Because you've got the Wojcicki sisters. I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced, but you've got Anne Wojcicki, who's the co-founder and CEO of 23andMe, which is the, of course, sort of infamous genetic testing company to find out if you're, 2% North African, which has itself had its share of data breaches and selling data. I don't want to, accuse them of something I can't back up. Point is, it's exactly what we're talking about, and not just Anne Wojcicki, but also her sister, Susan, I believe, is also in here. And there you go. Susan Wojcicki, CEO of YouTube. So again, as somebody seeking alternatives, this doesn't feel like much of an alternative to me. And just to run through a couple other examples, I saw, they accept health insurance from various providers, but in order to verify it, in order to have it recognized by the wellness company, here's an example. You can verify your identity through ID.me, which I recognized from my research into vaccine passports and digital ID. Again, this is not an alternative. This is exactly this feels to me like yet another funnel into the same digital, medical passport that aren't we trying to kind of avoid that? And yet here, this is an option available. And then you get into a discussion. Does that involve, building an alternative healthcare system, does it have to be that it excludes all of the currently available services? And that it's 100% new, and you have to build the new diagnostic company and you have to figure out a way to verify identity without the mainstream, or can it be a bit of both? And I think that's a very important question for people to ask themselves. And just lastly, the last thing I want to show from this is in terms of being counter to big pharma. Look, you've got this discussion to be had about patented drugs and off-patent drugs. And of course, the basis of the Zelenko protocol, the thing that started this all, was hydroxychloroquine and zinc and zithromycin, which are off-patent drugs. They're not hyper-controlled, by Merck or Pfizer or anything like that. They're available to anybody who can get a prescription. And of course, that became much more difficult. But you've got the wellness company offering basically an entire pharmaceutical panacea. They're not just selling vitamins and supplements, and we know this from the wellness kits. They do, of course, contain pharmaceutical, like prescription drugs, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, but this goes much further. The wellness company is offering a full range of just straight up pharmaceutical products as well. Whether or not these are contributing, to enriching big pharma is an open question. I'm just saying this was not what I was expecting to find when I was continuing to, Google the wellness company. I guess that's sort of the end of that thought on my end. What do you think? Oops, you are muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I think it's just all helpful with regards to expanding the current picture that people have of the company. And I wish that they would address people's questions and concerns, not just avoid them and harass people who are asking questions. I think there's a lot of people who have good questions, and the professional thing to do. I'm just like, who is their PR person, right? Like, that isn't just having someone come in and actually explain what's going on with regards to people's concerns, because of course the issue is that a lot of people have them.
Yeah. Instead of describing them as lies, which is right. Unfortunate. And it's definitely been uncomfortable, feeling as though there's a lot of hostility coming back at us. And it's not as if we're not being critical, but the whole point is, if you're building something like this, you have to be able to address criticism. If you're claiming to do one thing, but there's legitimate reasons to ask whether, it kind of looks like you're doing another thing, at least in some way, maybe. There's a very reasonable, kind of understandable way to respond to that. And it just doesn't feel like we've necessarily gotten that. But I hope people just remember, like, you can discuss these things. You can say, like, just like if we're talking about Walmart, and Walmart's got, or Amazon and their staffing practices, we can talk about that, right? If there are legitimate questions about an increasingly big alternative healthcare enterprise, it just seems kind of silly to me that we wouldn't be able to just as freely, honestly, and without worrying about being attacked by trolls. It seems like it's sort of our duty, again, as informed consumers, to ask questions about that. And because it should be able to withstand that and to show that it isn't, if there are unfounded concerns, then that should be pretty self-evident and should be fairly easy to address. So I guess I'm just saying it's been an interesting experience. And I'm just I'm happy others are asking questions as well, because presumably there will be good answers to them.
Liam, can we do one last thing? We had discussed possibly going over all the questions that we put together for them that they didn't ask. But instead, can you actually just pull up what I sent you on Signal? So the last two images I sent you on Signal, if you could pull those up. So someone provided this to me earlier today, and it's an email that was sent to affiliates, wellness company affiliates. Yeah.
But now, before I pull this up, because we want to really make sure this is.
Well, they're claiming that's what this is. We don't have to. Do you want to just not?
No, I want to make sure this is real.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable sharing this,
that.
but we can still speak to. I think, yeah, like let's let this be an exercise in us being extra cautious, if that's okay.
No, good. Okay, I appreciate that.
If it is real, it'll be worth it when we talk about it. Let's just put it that way.
Yep.
But let me say this though. So on that note, on the note of what you were thinking of pulling up, you've also, I just want to reiterate what's already been said in other contexts. You've got this company who's not only kind of seemingly kind of collecting the biggest names in the dissident doctors movement. You've also now got this same enterprise creating creating their own influential news organization, Vigilant News Network, but also the large scale affiliate campaign that they've got going, some of which involves direct payment, some of which involves, a portion of sales. You're creating, what we have now is a setup in the alternative media where a good chunk of the biggest, most influential, and in most cases, most reputable, not in every case, but in many cases, influencers, media outlets that would be the ones that, if hypothetically there were to be a company or a person or whatever being a little shady, they would be the ones who, as we've experienced over the last few years, would talk about it and would bring it to the people. It's not the kind of thing CBC News is or CNN is necessarily jumping on right away. So the point is, if you have such a lever over people, whether it's intentional or not, if you create a situation where enough people depend on you for their livelihood, or at least a significant enough proportion of their livelihood, that's a conflict of interest. And it's pretty straightforward. And that's scary. And you don't need to blame the affiliates for that. It's just basic psychology. Like, why would, if you have a positive relationship with an organization, if they're paying your bills, whether it's Pfizer or the wellness company, you're less likely to ask questions about it. And I just want to say that. I just want to kind of really impart on people. That's, I believe, the situation we're currently in, where whether or not there is any like influence intentionally being levered onto affiliates, or whether it just is ubiquitous, relationships that now exist, that presents a problem. The one thing that I really want to end on is we've definitely seen some really harsh kind of personal attacks on both sides of this discussion. And I want to say this. So you've got what appears to be Amazing Polly, who operates under a pseudonym and who does so for reasons she's explained, who is now basically, as far as I understand, she's being genuinely doxxed and being harassed and attacked, and she's having unwelcome communications going to other people she knows who have nothing to do with this. That's pretty scary, and that's not cool. Simultaneously, I think we have a kind of equivalent on the other side of the discussion, because Vigilant News Network, that's named after an individual that goes by the Vigilant Fox, who is also even more anonymous than Polly. And that person choosing to be anonymous, just like with Polly, is A-okay in my book. The idea that you have to give all of your, or even like the idea that you have to give personal information to people on the internet in order to participate is antithetical to, like, that's a ludicrous statement for anyone to genuinely make. And so I want to say, I think people should really think about this, like on both sides. Don't lose sight of the fact that, like, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I don't think we should be going after people personally and trying to dox them, whether or not they go under a pseudonym. And that includes things like I saw some really harsh comments in some of these, in one of the videos related to this that were saying some really, really crappy things, like violent things about Foster Colson. Don't do that. What are you doing? There is plenty to be critical of and plenty of genuine disagreement to be had without calling for violence, without, just being generally hateful. Wow. Did you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. I guess Rumble agrees. So I guess I'll that's basically the thought. And it's an uncomfortable discussion to have. Just we are better than that, I guess, is how I feel. And I'm not saying anyone should say this and not this. I'm just saying they're kind of basic standards of decency that I know I try to lead by example with. And I hope others will continue to. And it's the odd person. It's not everybody. But just to really kind of draw a line on what we're trying to inspire people to engage in here. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Thank you, Liam. That's an excellent thing to end on. I agree. Let's keep civil discourse going. It's really hard on Twitter, but do your best. And also pressing questions. I think both of those are a winning strategy.
Agreed.
Okay.
Okay. As we wrap up here, is there anywhere you want people to go to find you? Anywhere in particular?
If people want to read the piece that we worked on together and I published in November, they can go to my Substack, which is beyondthemaze.substack.com. And otherwise, no.
Beautiful. Okay, well, thank you all so much for watching. This has been been a very important discussion, I know, for Kristin and I to have. And we hope it's contributed positively and that you've taken something from it. And if there was something we mentioned during the stream that there was not a link dropped into the chat afterwards for, please don't hesitate. Leave it in the comments and I'll do that. Or hit us up on Twitter. Thank you so much, everybody. And now I will see if I can end the stream. Goodbye, everybody.
Okay, bye, Liam. Bye, everyone. Thank you. Oh, look, there's balloons.